4664 was my prison number. For over 18 years, I was imprisoned on Robben Island, known as just a number.
My name is Wasim Karam. I'm the Chief Executive of the National Youth Development Agency, and it's a real honor and privilege to be filming this documentary of Robben Island for purposes of screening at the Nelson Mandela Youth Dialogue. Of course, this Nelson Mandela Youth Dialogue is inaugural in its nature, and we are really proud and excited to be hosting our counterparts of young people from across South Africa and across our borders from the African continent as well. We're hosting this dialogue as part of the legacy of former President Mandela, who we know had a number of values attributed to him. Amongst these are the power of education, service to others, leadership, governance, and peace as well. As we reflect on the time that former President Mandela spent on Robben Island, we know the President was in prison for close to 27 years. And Robben Island is an important journey for any young South African and African to go on, to understand the sacrifices that were made by generations that came before us. And it's a reflection on the fact that the political freedom that we enjoy today in South Africa did not necessarily come easy or come cheap to anyone. I think when one makes this journey, it's a very emotional one in nature. You understand the purpose of sacrifice and the pain and suffering that came with what we've managed to achieve today. Of course, with that, one realizes, as former President Mandela said, that with the challenges in the past, there are many more challenges to be able to overcome in the future. But one draws inspiration and hope and resilience out of a journey like this for what could be possibility achieved in the future, and the enormous possibility that the strength of the human spirit holds for all of us.
I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy and freedom for all. It is an ideal which I hope to live for, but it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The people of South Africa have spoken in this election. They want change, and change is what they will get. Today is a day like no other before it.
This is where we saw our visitors, about 15 minutes. 15, yeah, and then it increased according to how they graded your behavior. So this was where the visitors sat and waited for husband, brother, father, and of course if you're a band or anything else, they would not allow you here. Yeah, I was banned for 5 years and house arrest. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I had to be in the flat. Saturday 2 p.m. to Monday 6 a.m. Couldn't leave.
So no parties?
At 22 when you're banned.
I mean, it's tough, eh? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just the warders' quarters and offices. Whatever you were saying confidentially, they knew everything. So, I mean, obviously we'd be writing, and you can read upside down. Our attorney was Shan Chetty when he was banned. from visiting us. There's a regulation. The minister could prohibit any attorney from visiting any prisoner or prisoners. Only banned Shan Chetty to visit us. So Dala Omar became our attorney, and this is where we meet with him as well. But this was also used as a court. It was a phone that you spoke in. The warder here could stop your conversation at any time because the warder would be listening on this side and the warder would be listening on that side. So the warder on this side was the person monitoring. So if I said, how's so-and-so, and that person was known, they would stop the call. So,
So would you have to speak in code, or would you just...
yeah, no, you spoke in code. You used people who were leaving to tell your family what codes would be used for who. Madiba was Perina, the big guy. So you had different code names for different simple ones so that the visitors also don't get confused. Yeah.
Was it always the case that you guys knew that this one was just
No,
the
Madiba.
captain of our ship? And we used the
Now,
word?
Madiba had an air about him, and he had a sense of a moment. He walked in a particular way, he talked in a deliberate way, and he did have that. So we'll be brought from, you see the where that flagpole is? The gates there, down this way, here to the visitor. Can you imagine there were lots of prisoners and lots of visitors and shouting matches. You don't know who's saying what. And Mrs. Mlangeni talks of how she was there and he was saying things, the old man Mlangeni, and she didn't hear a thing. She was just petrified and so on. So then the center was built.
Also, before you would just shout across the fence to people.
Yeah, no, originally, you know, in the 63, the first prisoners here were in 1963. These were the so-called Portco, Eastern Cape, people from Pretoria and so on, the Neckers and so on. And then 64, you had the MK people coming in. So you're walking back, that's your visit. You're not going to see this person again for how many months? And exhilarated yet depressed.
Yeah.
You know, so you're walking back. These are the National Youth Development Agency board members. And these, yeah.
I see.
So these are two ex-political prisoners who are permanent guides here on the prison. How many years you served here?
Oh, 4 years.
4 years.
And also I served 4 out of my... I'm one of the product of 16 June 76.
Oh.
This was my leader, Sasso, from Sasso.
Oh.
Okay, Sasso, South African Student Organization. Before Sasso, before that is another organization which was led by our president, the late Comrade Steve Bantu Bongebiko. Right.
And
I'm from Soweto, guys. That's the cradle of the 76 student uprisings. And we had to go out from Naledi High, became the most famous. And we were faced with a very difficult choice, you know, submit or resist. And we chose to resist. And here you are today.
and you must remember that the demeaning thing, because 76 was a watershed mark, the demeaning thing the Boers used to say is, "Hulle klipgooiers,"
Yeah.
because you didn't have arms, right? And actually, very few people who came here had arms.
Yeah.
You see, they fought, it was a lot of ideas, you were fighting ideas, But those who were real MK were few. The majority were community organization people. And they would try to demean you by saying, "Klipgooiers." And that became a phrase used by others who say, "Yeah, man, you're also a klipgooier, you know." So you
Even
create...
some amongst us.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
To diminish you. And yeah. But these guys have been, they're diminished as
Yeah,
well.
let me also say this, Chief. These guys, they carry the story of today with the eye on tomorrow. Because we lived yesterday, and we know what yesterday was all about. But your focus should be, as much as you learn from yesterday, which is what you're coming to do here, you should make sure that today is better than yesterday. But tomorrow is even much better. And now you, in the position that you have now, you are the catalyst to that. We cannot make you inherit a country that is on its knees, because then we're burdening you without looking into tomorrow, because we are too focused on yesterday and today. Remember that.
And on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, guys,
Absolutely.
thank you very much. And I'm sure Prof will tell you that. When we came as the young generation of 76, we were so vibrant, radical. Leaders at that time, maybe they were
Submissive.
submissive. But when we came with that high moral,
High militancy.
militants. And we changed the
Just high.
We changed the hey, led by leaders who were also radical. Seth was one of them.
All right.
Okay.
Now, thanks, Chief.
Sure.
Have a great time in there, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
Were brought in here, still shackled and unshackled. No car. Walked.
What do you mean?
No car. So this was all locked, right? And that was another gate. And this is the administration office. And you were fingerprinted. So this was the armory where the guns were kept. So this is the uniforms. This is an original pair of shoes.
Now, safari almost.
Yes,
They used to be prison uniform.
yes.
Oh, okay.
When you spoke earlier about the different clothing for the age groups,
No, the different clothing for the race groups.
all the age, not age.
Yeah, so you had short pants. If you were African, you had short pants. And if you were colored Indian, they gave you long pants. And then it got equalized. By the time we came here, it got equalized. The breakfast was pap. You got these 4 slices of bread. And half a tablespoon of brown sugar. So you could choose where you wanted to have the sugar, in your coffee or in your rooibos or in your porridge, right? And lunchtime, there was sam for Africans. Coloreds and Indians got mealie rice. This is where the censors were, and the censors were part of the prison, but they were security police chosen. They were amongst the warders. They would select those who were going to work in the census office because of that. Yeah. So here's a long before Windows started, we had letters which were written where you had windows in your letters.
Yeah, and then they would cancel out things they
Yeah,
don't want you
absolutely.
to hear.
Or they would black it out.
Yeah, and leave you to be traumatized because you
could
know he
hear.
is now dead. Now
Yeah,
to
you
know.
know,
He's now then, that's it.
That's it.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that was the examining couch, and yeah, this.
Might have left the bed worse than how you entered.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was, I mean, look, it looks better, but the walls wept because this is a swamp. It's a swamp, and the water in the showers was seawater. So you can use anything. Eventually, we fought with the Red Cross when the Red Cross came here in 77, and we said to them, why should we speak to you? They said, well, we've been here. We said, so obviously you have had no effect. And they had to prove they had an effect. And the first thing that happened after that, we got hot water. The second year, I think it was. This was Tsafenda's cell. So they put they put this masonite separation to ensure that Tsafendas was here. So if anybody else was isolated, he was totally isolated.
Is this where he would have slept?
Yes, this was.
There's no mattress. There's nothing.
No, there's no mattress. That's
Just
that's your.
This is where you would sleep even in winter.
Yes.
It's not a hotel.
Huh? You see 3 blankets.
In winter.
This was the recreation space. Here is the dining room. You want to go into Mandela's cell? So this is a picture. You can see the 2 well-known bandits, Sisulu, yes. And this is the kind of things they just make them do. Meaningless work, just breaking up the slate until people stopped. You know, it was meaningless and people stopped it. But this was the courtyard.
Also, there was no reason.
There's
for
no
this.
reason.
Yeah.
So was Krotoa the first female to be on Robben Island?
Yeah, we regard her as the first political prisoner, female political prisoner. Yeah.
Right, so really, she's the mother of the nation. A prisoner, he was a detainee. The General Law Amendment Act was amended to include what's called the Sobukwe clause, and the only person ever held under that clause was Sobukwe. Yeah. Remember, he led the anti-pass campaign on the 21st of March 1960 and presented himself for arrest and was arrested and did a 3-year sentence in Pretoria, and after that was sent here. Annually, Parliament renewed the detention until 69. Here's somebody who's born in Grafrinet, lived in Soweto, tried, sentenced in Pretoria, brought to Robben Island, and then banished to Galisiwe.
He was allowed, I mean, his wife could visit him.
Eventually, when they realized that the isolation was affecting, then his wife and the little kids were allowed 3. This is where the dogs were kept.
Oh.
Yeah, and if you look at the space, it's larger than the single cell.
We are at the house of Robert Sobukwe, former leader of the PAC, who we understand was the only one who was contained in this space, because he wasn't necessarily a prisoner, but he was a detainee, so they kept him here in isolation. until 1969 we understand. I think what we've seen here mostly, not just in this house only, but through the main prison as well, is conditions. I mean, look, it's my first time here. I've never been here before, so these conditions are really eye-opening of the kind of sacrifices that were made for the liberation of our country. And some of the things we take for granted today, you know, we take for granted the liberties that we have, the choices that we have, some of the access to the things that we have, but we take them for granted. But really, these things didn't come cheap, and the sacrifices. I mean, I looked at what really got to me is the sleeping area. And there was no mattress, there was no bed, no nothing. It was just too thin mats, and it really, I mean, for me, it really was a daunting experience. I mean, I don't know how you survive that, and you come out and you preach reconciliation, and that to me speaks of the kind of maturity and leadership. This place was supposed to break. Everyone was here. No one was supposed to leave this place a functioning human being. And young people could learn about resilience. I mean, look, at the moment we're facing enormous challenges as a country, the kind of challenges that when you look at, you think maybe we're not going to come back from this. But coming here and seeing what those that came before us did and what they could overcome, really one is filled with a spirit of resilience. And I think more than anything, in one word, young people need to know the story, because it teaches us about resilience and how if people are determined to do something, they can overcome.
So today we're in the house of Robert Sobukwe, where he lived whilst he was detained on Robben Island. The tour today has been really reflective, I think, for all of us at the NYDA. We don't often get to interact with our history, I think, as closely as you do when you come here. And I think one of the key lessons and one of the big sort of takeaways from today is when you think about the political prisoners, especially who were here, they were all young people, most of them students in their early 20s, some of them even younger. And at such a young age, they understood the idea that if you don't do it, nobody else is going to. And regardless of what the cost was, we've been privileged to hear firsthand from Sats Cooper about his experiences here. You understand the cost was so high, but people believed in their ideas and the idea of equality so much that they were willing to endure whatever happened on this island. And so I think that's a really important lesson for us as young people, is to remember that there always will be a cost if something is worth it. And we have to be willing to bear the cost of fighting for a better world, fighting for a more equal world. I think especially as young South Africans, in the moment that we find ourselves in, we have an even greater responsibility, not just to the people here, but for the ideas that they stood for, to put our hands up and to get involved and to find ways that we can make things better.
Okay, this was the lime quarry. This is the lime quarry. Right.
So this is the lime quarry.
Right. And you don't quite get the harshness of it now. So every prisoner was pushed into, the idea was to break you. So every group of prisoners was sent here, and the cave that you see is where you had to use it for everything.
Oh.
Eating, defecation, etc., 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 in the same place.
The quarry, what does this land for?
This land is for the roads. You use it on the roads, and so on. But also it's used in building, so you could make blocks with it. I mean, the prison was made from blocks we made, so it's that kind of thing. So there's no extra labor coming in. You built the prison. So this is the lime quarry. There's a stone quarry on that side, which Van Riebeck used to build part of the castle. So it's stone from there. And then there's a bluestone quarry on that end, which has now been overtaken by water. So it's been rebuilt now.
My name is Nishan Bolton. I'm the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. We are on Robben Island today, the home of Ahmed Kathrada from 1964 to 1982, before he was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison. Ahmed Kathrada was one of the Rivonia trialists, but prior to Rivonia was also involved in the treason trial, the Defiance Campaign trial. In fact, every major political trial of the previous century, he was a major participant in that. House arrested, banished, arrested at Rivonia with Sisulu and others, sentenced to life imprisonment. Although he had the opportunity, perhaps the best possible opportunity to appeal his sentence, he decided against it, and primarily because his view was that even though he was Indian, he had been involved in the struggle and didn't want to be seen to be separate from his comrades by appealing what was potentially a death sentence. Arrived on Robben Island on the 13th of June. They were sentenced on the 12th and overnight transported here to Robben Island and started serving his life sentence. Life sentence at the time meant life. Unlike today, where it's 25 years, they were then expected to die in prison. In prison, you will see this triumph of the human spirit over adversity is how Kathrada described what their time on Robben Island was all about. Pursuing his studies, completed 4 degrees here, encouraged many prisoners to study, set up communications channels with everybody outside of the country and particularly the ANC, involved in smuggling news to make sure that they were kept abreast of what was happening outside of the country. And in a way, part of the leadership of the ANC on Robben Island, released from Pollsmoor Prison in 1989, went on to become the parliamentary advisor to President Mandela at the time, served as a parliamentarian until 1999, stepped out of there, then worked on getting Robben Island declared a World Heritage Site, was the first board chairperson of the Robben Island Museum, and a lot of his work contributed to the place as it is today. Fervent advocate of the importance of history. Not only the teaching of history, but the archiving of history, and ensuring that not only his and Mandela's story are the ones that are important. He was an advocate of trying to ensure that history had as many of its participants as possible, their stories recorded and told, so that we understood the liberation struggle of South Africa as not belonging to one organization or a set of individuals only, but to the widest range of people. History is not made by just a few individuals, but our liberation was contributed to by people of all races, all color, all genders, and their stories and contributions must be recorded in whatever way is possible. Which is why I'm happy that the NYDA came here today and perhaps will find a way in its programs of emphasizing the teaching of history, the exposure of young people to history, not only this site, but many others across the country.
My name is Karabo Mahale. I'm the Executive Deputy Chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency. We've just come back from a trip to Robben Island, a historic site in South Africa that has shaped what we know today as democracy and freedom. It is very important for all of us as young people to take a moment to reflect on where we have been as a people and where we should be going. A youth that does not know its history will definitely not know where it's supposed to go and how it's supposed to shape the future. So we want to call on all young people to get to know more about their history, be informed so that we can be able to build a better South Africa that is just and free for all to live in harmony, in peace and in prosperity.
Hi guys, my name is Wasanda Luata. I am the Executive Chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency. Today we are at the Robben Island Museum, and the main purpose of our visit namhlanje was to engage with the rich history that is found in the museum itself, but also to serve as a reflection on the life and times of our former statesman, President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. This really is a pictorial depiction of the history of the political prisoners that were incarcerated on Robben Island. You'll see here in 1964, we've got, some of the political prisoners, obviously Nelson Mandela being one of them. And in August, there's just an indication that Winnie Mandela had a visit on Robben Island for the first time. So as we move along, you'll see here in 1969, after his release from Robben Island, Robert Sobukwe is banished to Kimberley and kept under 12-hour house arrest. Interestingly enough, if you look at just the chronology, in 1969 you had Robert Sobukwe, who was banished to Kimberley, but in the same year you had Winnie Mandela was arrested on the 12th of May in 1969. Can't talk about the rich history of this country without reflecting on the protest actions of 1976, where young people took to the streets, where they were protesting against the then means of instruction, and there were really a youth that was resistant, a youth that was resilient and militant and combatant in their fight for a free and equitable education system for this country. So what we'll find also in our rich history is, the solidarity that South Africa shared with the various African countries that faced a similar struggle. You look at your SWAPO, your Frelimo, and the likes. What we find there is just this deep sense of solidarity that the ANC shared with the respective liberation movements across Africa and its diaspora, because we had an appreciation that the challenges that South Africa faced were not necessarily unique to the challenges and the struggles that were waged by other African countries. And it is, those ideals that would have inculcated what former statesman Nelson Mandela would have lived for, this idea of having solidarity amongst African states, solidarity amongst Africa, and it was precisely, that needle that will then sew that thread between ourselves and all African states, so that we're able to get to a point where truly, the ideals of solidarity amongst Africa and its states becomes a realization. So today we embarked on a tour on the Robben Island Museum, and primarily it was underscored by the idea that Robben Island served it had multiple purposes throughout our rich history. If you trace it as far back as the 16th century, Robben Island housed, the first female political prisoner, Krotoa, and recent history would have been, Robben Island would have served as a platform for, the political prisoners that fought for the liberation of this country, and Nelson Mandela being part of them. So we felt that given the fact that the NYDA will be hosting the Nelson Mandela Youth Dialogue and Ethical Leadership Program in March in Mthatha, we felt it necessary to retrace his steps and his life, and one of the key areas that we needed to touch on was Robben Island, given the fact that he had served so many years of his adulthood in this particular island. So it's important for young people to know and engulf themselves in the history of Robben, and not just Robben Island, but the entire history of our country, so that we're able to learn from the various lessons and the ideals of which former statesman Nelson Mandela would have lived for. If we look at a nation that is working towards the ideals of nation building, social cohesion, then it is important that precisely young people form part and parcel of that discourse, so that we are able to work towards that ideal that which he served and lived for. But also, in addition to that, what becomes important for us as the NYDA is to have an opportunity where we are engaged in intergenerational discussions around the concepts of ethical leadership, the concepts of how do we build a nation collectively as young people, as the ones who will ultimately inherit that particular society. I'm also reminded by the words, there's a saying that goes, the human spirit, like water, is able to triumph through any oppression. And it is within that spirit that we want to encourage young people to continue being a young people, being youth that is resilient, being youth that is able to see themselves through the various obstacles that they face. So the purpose of the site visit today was primarily to not just reflect on the life and times of former statesman Nelson Mandela, but to also inculcate the ideals of which he lived for, so that we're able to collectively form part of that narrative and that society that we envision.